She came to say goodbye, her heart set on walking away until the cowboy's voice, low and aching, held her still at the door. Will she find the courage to leave the past behind, or the faith to stay for love? The sun was just beginning to set over Dry Creek when Emma Hart pulled her coat tighter and stepped onto the porch. The boards creaked under her boots, the same way they had on the day she'd first arrived. Everything about this place, the wind, the worn wood, the scent of horses and hay, felt like it was waiting for her to turn back. But she couldn't. Not this time. Inside, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that followed after words had already done their damage. She could see her packed bag by the doorway, her hat resting on top like it already belonged to someone else. The air smelled faintly of coffee and pine soap. She had scrubbed the counter clean that morning, not because it needed it, but because she didn't know how to say goodbye. Her fingers hovered over the doorknob when she heard boots scuff behind her. Slow, heavy, familiar. She didn't turn. She knew that sound like she knew her own heartbeat. Emma. The voice, low, worn, roughened by dust and restraint, rolled across the room like distant thunder. She froze. It wasn't the word that stopped her. It was the way he said it, careful, almost gentle, as if it might break something between them if he said it too loud. She turned then, her breath catching at the sight of him. Levi Carson stood a few steps away, hat in his hands, dark hair mussed, eyes shadowed from too many sleepless nights. He looked every bit the rancher, broad shoulders, sunburnt skin. A man who belonged to the land more than to people. And yet, he looked lost. "I was just," she began. "Leavin'," his voice cut in, quiet, but certain. He nodded toward the bag. "I figured." Her throat tightened. "It's better this way, Levi." "For who?" he asked, taking a slow step forward. "You or me?" She didn't answer. The question hurt too much. He looked at her for a long moment, then set his hat on the table. The sound of it landing seemed final, like the closing of a chapter neither of them wanted to end. "You think walking away makes it easier," he said, his voice steady now. "But some goodbyes don't stay," said Emma. "Not when there's still something left between them." Her eyes burned. "You don't understand. I can't keep hoping for something that won't change." He took another step, close enough for her to see the lines near his eyes, the kind carved by work and worry. "Then don't hope," he said softly. "Just stay." The words slipped through the quiet, simple but certain, and in them she heard the same thing that had drawn her here months ago. Not promises, not pity, but a kind of truth she'd been running from. Her hand trembled on the doorknob. She wasn't ready to open it. Not yet. If you've ever been caught between leaving and staying, you'll want to see what he does next, because not every goodbye ends at the door. Morning came soft and gold, spilling across the ranch like forgiveness. Emma hadn't slept much. She'd spent the night staring at the ceiling of the small room Levi had built with his own hands, the one that still smelled faintly of cedar and rain. Her bag remained by the door, untouched. She told herself she'd leave after breakfast, but she knew she was lying. Outside, the sound of boots crunching gravel told her Levi was already up. Through the thin curtain, she saw him leading the bay mare toward the pasture. His movements were calm, methodical, like every morning before, yet something about him seemed quieter, more careful, as if he was afraid that one wrong word might send her running again. Emma wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and stepped onto the porch. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of sage and saddle oil. She watched him a long while before saying, "You should have gone ridin' by now." Levi didn't look up, didn't want to spook the horses. She frowned. "They don't scare easily." His mouth twitched, half a smile, half a sigh. "Wasn't talking about them." The silence between them stretched, filled only by the soft snort of the mare. Emma crossed her arms, her voice low. "You think if you say something just right, I'll stay?" "No," Levi said, finally meeting her gaze. "I think if you leave before you say what's really on your mind, you'll regret it." She looked away, eyes tracing the horizon. The mountains in the distance were painted in amber light, the kind that made everything look temporary. "You don't know what's on my mind." "I know enough," he said. "You came here runnin' from something same as I did once. The only difference is, I learned that runnin' doesn't fix much." His tone wasn't sharp, but it cut through her all the same. Emma had tried to leave this place behind before, and each time, she'd found herself circling back, drawn by the rhythm of hooves, the scent of rain, and the man whose silence had somehow said more than any words ever could. Levi tied the reins to the fence and wiped his hands on a rag. "Breakfast's on the stove," he said, nodding toward the house. "Ain't fancy, but it's warm." She hesitated. "Are you always this kind to the woman who tries to leave you?" He gave her a long, steady look. "Only to the one I hope comes back." Her chest tightened. She wanted to be angry, to remind him that hope was dangerous, but she couldn't. Not when he said it like that, low and rough, like it was both a confession and a prayer. As she stepped inside, the smell of coffee wrapped around her. On the table sat 2 cups. He'd poured one for her, same as always. For the first time in days, Emma sat down. She didn't know if she was staying, but she wasn't leaving. Not yet. The morning settled into a quiet routine. Levi moved through chores with the patience of habit, while Emma lingered by the fence, pretending to watch the sky. In truth, she was watching him, the way his shoulders moved beneath the worn fabric of his shirt, the way he touched every creature on the ranch with the same quiet respect he'd never quite learned to give himself. He didn't speak much, and neither did she. But the silence between them no longer felt heavy. It was something else now, something alive. "Hand me that rope," Levi said, nodding toward the fence post beside her. Emma obeyed without a word. Their hands brushed, and she felt the warmth of his callous skin, steady, grounding. He tied a knot, tight and sure, then glanced at her. "You remember how to braid tack?" Her lips curved slightly. "You forget I used to help you mend every bridle in this place?" "Didn't forget," he said. "Just wonderin' if you remembered how to stay." Emma froze, the teasing edge in his voice cutting deep. She opened her mouth, then shut it again. "That's not fair." "Maybe not," Levi said, looping the rope once more. "But neither is leavin' without sayin' goodbye." Her breath caught. He didn't raise his voice, but something in the way he said it made her heart stumble. She'd come here to end things clean, to walk away before the ache got worse. But he wasn't letting her make it easy. She turned toward the corral, where the horses grazed lazily in the sun. "You don't understand," she said softly. "There's nothing left for me here." Levi's hands stilled. "You keep saying that like I don't see you standing here." The words landed hard. He looked up then, eyes steady and unflinching. "You talk about goin', but every time you reach that door, you stop. You think that's just a chance?" She shook her head, anger rising not at him, but at herself. "I stop because I'm weak, Levi. Because I don't know how to let go." He stepped closer, close enough for her to feel the warmth coming off him, the scent of leather and hay, and something unspoken. "No," he said, voice low. "You stop because you still care, and you're scared that staying means you'll have to admit it." The truth of it hung between them, raw and quiet. For a moment, the whole ranch seemed to still the wind, the horses, even the distant hum of the windmill. Emma looked away first. "You always talk too much for a man who doesn't say much." That earned the faintest smile from him. "And you always ran from the things that mattered most." She wanted to deny it, but couldn't. The walls she'd built were thinning with every word he said. When he turned back to his work, she stayed where she was, watching him. For the first time, she wondered if goodbye had ever been what she truly wanted. By afternoon, the sky had turned the color of steel. Storm clouds rolled in low and thick, swallowing the horizon. Levi glanced up from the corral, brow furrowed. "Rain's comin'," he murmured. Emma stood on the porch, arms wrapped tight around herself. "Seems like it always does when things get hard." He looked over, half smiling. Is that so? She nodded. Back home, every time my pa raised his voice, thunder followed. I used to think the sky was trying to drown out the sound. Levi leaned on the fence, eyes distant. Maybe it was. The first drops fell, soft and steady. Emma stayed where she was, watching as he unhitched the horses and led them toward shelter. His movements were efficient but unhurried, like he trusted the rain to do what it needed before letting up. When he returned to the porch, his shirt clung to him, darkened by water, and his hair dripped onto the boards. "You'll catch a cold," she said, reaching for a towel hanging by the door. He took it, their fingers brushing again just a moment, but enough to spark something that neither of them could name. He wiped his face, then handed it back. "You always worry about things that ain't yours to carry." "Maybe," she said quietly, "but someone's got to." He tilted his head, studying her. "Who carried you then?" The question stopped her cold. Her gaze dropped to the wet floorboards. "No one." Levi said nothing at first. The storm outside thickened, thunder rumbling low across the fields. "You don't have to keep walking alone," he said finally. "Not if you don't want to." Emma laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. "And do what, Levi? Stay here? Pretend like this place can wash away everything I ran from?" He didn't flinch. "Ain't pretendin', if it's true." She looked up at him then, really looked the lines around his mouth, the quiet hurt in his eyes, the steadiness that had kept this ranch alive through drought and loss. "You talk like you ain't lost anything," she whispered. He hesitated, then leaned against the railing, rain dripping from his sleeves. "I lost my brother," he said. 3 years back. We were fixin' a fence in a flash flood. I told him we could beat it." His voice grew rough. "I was wrong." The words hung heavy between them, mixing with the sound of rain. Emma stepped closer, the distance between them narrowing to inches. "You never told me that." "Never had a reason to," he said. "Till now." Her hand trembled as she reached for his, but stopped halfway. "You think pain just fades if you say it out loud?" "No," he said softly, eyes meeting hers. "But maybe it stops owning you." Outside, the thunder rolled farther away, the storm beginning to break. Inside, something else softened too, the space between their wounds, the unspoken thing that was slowly finding its name. The morning after the storm was quiet. The ranch breathed again fresh, washed clean, the scent of wet earth still hanging in the air. Emma stood by the porch rail, coffee mug in hand, watching the sun break through the clouds. Every drop that clung to the grass caught the light, turning the pasture into a sea of silver. Levi came up behind her, boots soft against the damp boards. "Didn't think you'd still be here," he said, voice low. She didn't turn. "Guess I didn't either." He moved to stand beside her, resting a hand on the railing. The silence between them wasn't awkward anymore, it was something gentler, something that said more than words could. For a while, they just watched the land wake up. "Fence by the north pasture's down," he said finally. "Rain hit it hard. I'll help you fix it." Levi glanced at her, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You don't have to." "I know," she said, setting her mug down. "But I want to." He didn't argue. They saddled up and rode out together, the ground soft beneath the horses' hooves. The air still hummed with the quiet after a storm, and every sound, every breath, felt sharper somehow. When they reached the fence line, the damage wasn't bad, but it gave them something to do, something to share. Emma held the post steady, while Levi hammered it back into place. Their movements found a rhythm, unspoken and easy, the way two people fall into step without meaning to. After a while, Levi spoke. "You ever think about what comes after?" She looked up, puzzled. "After what?" "After runnin'," he said. "After all the places you leave behind." Emma hesitated. "I used to think there was always another place waiting, another start. But the truth is," she swallowed hard, "sometimes I think I just keep leaving because I don't know how to stay." Levi leaned on the fence, hammer in hand. Staying ain't easy, he said. Takes more guts than leaving ever did. She met his eyes. You say that like you know. He looked out toward the hills, jaw tight. I do. Took me a long time to stop blaming myself for things I couldn't fix. Emma waited, sensing there was more. When my brother died, he said quietly, I thought if I kept working, kept moving, maybe I could outlast the hurt. But all it did was make the house quieter. She stepped closer. And now? Now it doesn't feel so empty, he said, glancing at her. Not since you came back. The words slipped between them like sunlight through broken clouds. Soft, unexpected, real. Emma's throat tightened, but she didn't look away. Maybe this was what staying felt like. Not safe. Not peace. Just a moment where the hurt didn't win. She smiled faintly. Guess we're both learning how to stop running. Levi nodded. One fence at a time. By late afternoon, the sky was clear again. A wide stretch of blue that seemed endless above the plains. Levi and Emma had just finished mending the last post when the distant sound of hooves drifted through the still air. At first, it was faint, steady, deliberate, but growing closer. Levi straightened, his expression sharpening. Expectin' someone? Emma asked. He shook his head. Not a soul. The rider crested the hill moments later. A tall man, in a dark duster and hat, pulled low. His horse was a chestnut gelding, foam along its neck from a hard ride. When he reached the gate, he didn't dismount right away. He just tipped his hat and looked between them. Afternoon, the stranger said, his voice smooth but carrying an edge. Name's Colt Avery. I'm looking for a woman, 'bout your height, brown hair. Said she might have come this way. Emma froze. Her hand tightened around the fence post until her knuckles whitened. Levi noticed. What's this about? Levi asked evenly. Colt smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Just some unfinished business, friend. She belongs back home, that's all. Emma found her voice, quiet but firm. I don't belong to anyone. That made Colt's smile fade. You run from your word, Emma? That doesn't sound like you. Levi took a step forward, the quiet weight of his presence cutting through the tension. She said she ain't going with you. That's all there is to it. Colt's gaze hardened. You her keeper now, Carson? Levi's jaw tightened. No, but I am the man standing in front of her. The silence that followed was thick and dangerous. The wind stirred the grass, and somewhere a hawk cried overhead. Colt's horse stamped the dirt, impatient. Emma's pulse raced. She hadn't heard that name Colt Avery in months. He was a remnant of the life she'd buried, the man who'd promised her the world and left her with bruises she couldn't explain. She had thought she'd lost him somewhere between miles of dust and fear. Levi's hand hovered near his belt, not a threat, just readiness. You'd best be riding on, he said quietly. Ain't nothing for you here. Colt's eyes flicked between them. You think this is over? She'll have to come back eventually. Folks like her don't stay gone. She'll stay as long as she wants, Levi said, voice like gravel. For a moment, Emma thought Colt might reach for his gun. Instead, he spat in the dirt, swung back into the saddle, and turned his horse toward the open road. You're making a mistake, Carson, he called over his shoulder. She's in trouble. You'll see. They watched him ride off until the sound of hooves faded into the wind. Emma let out a shaky breath. He found me. Levi's eyes stayed on the horizon. He won't touch you again. Not while I'm here. She wanted to thank him, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she nodded, her chest tight with something halfway between fear and safety. For the first time, she believed him. The next few days passed in uneasy quiet. The ranch seemed to breathe, waiting for something none of them wanted to name. Levi worked longer hours, mending fences that didn't need mending, while Emma kept to the house, her hands never still scrubbing, folding, sweeping like movement alone could hold off the dread that had crept back into her chest. Every sound made her flinch. The gate creaking, the dogs barking, the wind tapping against the windows. She tried to tell herself Colt wouldn't return so soon. But deep down, she knew men like him didn't give up when they'd been told no. By the fourth morning, the air turned heavy again. The horizon shimmered, the sky pale and cold. Emma was hanging linens when she saw the dust trail thin at first, then rising, spreading like smoke. Her breath caught. "Levi," she called, her voice trembling. He stepped out of the barn, hand shading his eyes. His shoulders stiffened. "Get inside," he said, already walking toward the fence. She hesitated. "Levi." "Go," he said, not looking back. Emma did as he said, but she stayed at the window, heart hammering as Colt Avery rode into the yard again, this time with two other men. Lawmen, judging by their badges. Colt dismounted first, the smirk on his face too calm for comfort. "Afternoon again, Carson," Colt called. "Told you I'd be back." Levi met him halfway. "You said your piece. Ain't nothing changed." Colt nodded toward one of the men beside him. "This here's Deputy Rourke. He's got papers sayin' that woman's under my guardianship till she turns 21. I'm just here to bring her home properly." Levi's voice dropped to steel. "You can ride those papers straight back to town. She ain't property." Rourke unfolded the document. Unreadable. "We don't mean trouble, Carson. But if she's a runaway, the law's clear. She ain't runnin' from nothin' but a man who doesn't know what love is," Levi said. Emma's chest ached. She'd never heard him speak with that kind of fire before, like every word cost him something, but he meant every one. Colt smirked. "Touchin'. But you can't save what you don't want to save." That did it. Levi stepped closer, his voice low, controlled. "You're right, but you can't cage what's already free." For a tense moment, no one moved. The horses shifted, uneasy. Then, from inside the house, Emma pushed open the door and stepped out, her heart thudding. "I'm not going with you," she said, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Not now, not ever." Colt's expression darkened. "You think you've found yourself a hero?" "No," she said softly. "Just someone who listens." Rourke glanced between them, then folded the paper and tucked it away. "Seems she's made her choice," he nodded to Colt. "We're done here." Colt's jaw flexed, but he said nothing. He mounted his horse and rode off, the others following. Levi didn't move until the sound of hooves faded into the hills. Then he turned to Emma, eyes full of quiet relief and worry. "Are you sure you're ready for what comes next?" She nodded. "I am now." That night, the wind carried a chill sharp enough to cut through bone. The house was quiet, except for the slow crackle of the fire in the hearth. Levi sat in his chair, boots off, hands resting heavy on his knees. Across from him, Emma sat curled on the rug, her face lit by the flicker of flame. The weight of what had happened still hung between them: Colt's return, the lawmen, the threat that had almost taken her away again. For the first time since sunset, Emma spoke. "He won't stop," she said softly. "Colt doesn't take no for an answer." Levi's jaw tightened. "Then, he'll learn to." She gave a hollow laugh. "You don't understand. He's been like that since I met him. Smooth talk, easy smile, but mean underneath. I thought he'd change once we left home. I thought I could fix him." Levi looked up, his gaze steady. "You don't fix men like that, Emma. You survive 'em." Her eyes glistened, reflecting the firelight. "I didn't think I would some nights." The words hit him like a blow. He wanted to say something, but the right words wouldn't come. Instead, he stood, grabbed another log, and placed it on the fire. The sparks leapt up, filling the silence. When he sat down again, his voice was low. "You know, I used to think silence was a kind of peace. After my brother died, I stopped talking more than I had to. Figured words didn't change nothin'." Emma turned toward him, curious. "What made you start again?" He met her eyes. "You." She blinked. "Me?" Levi nodded, slow and certain. "The day you showed up at that door. ready to leave. Something in your voice. It sounded like hope, trying to find a place to rest. Guess I realized I'd been quiet for too long. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The fire popped, the old clock ticked, and outside, the wind whispered against the windows. Emma shifted closer to the hearth, wrapping her arms around her knees. My mama used to sing when she was scared, she said quietly. Said it kept the darkness from getting too close. I stopped singing the day Colt hit her. Stopped believing it mattered. Levi leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Maybe it still does. Maybe it ain't about keeping the dark out. Maybe it's about remembering there's light still left. Her throat tightened. You really believe that? He nodded. I do when you're here. She stared at him, eyes searching for something she didn't dare name. Then, softly, almost like a confession, she began to hum a trembling, broken tune that filled the room like the first dawn after a long storm. Levi closed his eyes and let it wash over him, his chest aching with something too deep for words. When the song faded, he spoke just above a whisper. If you ever need a place to sing again, you'll find it here. Emma smiled through the shimmer of tears. Then I guess I ain't leaving after all. The next evening arrived quiet and golden. The air smelled of dust and wood smoke, the kind of peace that always comes before something breaks. Emma was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of stew, the same simple rhythm she'd come to rely on when her mind started racing. Levi was outside, oiling the saddle leather, humming low under his breath a tune she recognized. Her tune. For a fleeting moment, it felt like they'd outrun the world. But peace, she'd learned, never stayed long where fear had once taken root. The knock came just as the sun dipped below the horizon, 3 firm raps that made the walls echo. Levi's hand stilled mid-motion. He looked toward the door, shoulders squaring. Emma froze. Stay here, he said quietly, setting the oil rag aside. She wanted to argue, but the tone of his voice stopped her cold. It wasn't fear, it was final. Levi opened the door slowly. Standing on the porch was Colt Avery, hat in hand, eyes sharp as ever. But this time, he wasn't smiling. Behind him stood no deputies, no pretense of law, just the man himself, coiled and dangerous. Even in Carson, Colt drawled. Didn't figure we'd end things on a goodbye that was dull. Levi didn't move. You're trespassing. Maybe, Colt said, stepping forward, boots scraping the wood. But I came to make things right. Girl owes me something. Emma appeared in the doorway behind Levi, her heart pounding. I don't owe you a damn thing, Colt. His gaze snapped to her. You think you can just walk away? After everything I gave you? Levi stepped between them, his voice low and steady. You gave her pain, that's all. And I ain't letting you give her any more. Colt's hand twitched near his hip. Careful, cowboy, you ain't the law out here. Don't need to be, Levi said. I just need you gone. The air went still. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the faint crackle of the fire behind them. Then Colt laughed short, bitter. You really think she's staying for you? She'll leave, Carson. Women like her always do. Levi's expression didn't change. Maybe she will, but it'll be her choice, not yours. Emma's breath caught. She'd spent so long running from Colt, from herself, from the fear that she'd never belong anywhere. But now, hearing Levi's words, something inside her settled. She stepped forward, her voice trembling but strong. You're right, Colt, she said. I am leaving, but not with you. Not ever again. The words landed like a hammer. Colt's eyes flickered anger, disbelief, and something that looked almost like loss. Without another word, he turned, climbed onto his horse, and rode into the fading light. Levi watched until the dust settled. Only then did he turn to her, his face softer now. Are you sure you're all right? Emma nodded, though her voice broke when she answered. For the first time in a long while, I think I am. He reached for her hand. Then maybe now we can both stop running. She smiled through the tears. Maybe now we can start living. The dawn that followed was quiet and soft, the kind that didn't need to prove itself. The hills were brushed with gold, the air thick with the scent of dew and lilac. Emma stood by the window, fingers resting against the frame, watching the light spill across the ranch like a promise. For the first time in years, she didn't feel the need to run. The weight that had followed her across towns, across heartaches, had finally lifted. Behind her, the floorboards creaked. Levi stepped into the room, still half asleep, boots in hand, hair mussed from the pillow. "You been up long?" he asked, voice rough with morning. She smiled faintly. "Couldn't sleep. The quiet feels different now." He came to stand beside her, gaze sweeping over the land they'd both fought to hold on to. "Different how?" "Like it belongs to me too," she said softly. He nodded, the corner of his mouth lifting. "Reckon it always did. You just had to stop leaving long enough to see it." Emma laughed under her breath. "Guess you were right about that." The ranch stirred to life around them, the lowing of cattle, the distant clatter of a pail, the wind shifting through the grass. It all sounded like something beginning, not ending. By mid-morning, the townsfolk arrived. Word had spread fast about what had happened with Colt Avery, how Levi Carson had stood his ground, and how Emma Hart had faced down her past without flinching. The small community gathered not to gossip, but to celebrate what they called a long time comin'. Someone suggested a picnic, and soon tables were set under the big elm tree by the barn. Emma baked biscuits, laughing when Levi tried to steal one off the tray before they'd cooled. "You always were impatient," she teased. He grinned, that quiet warmth back in his eyes. "Only when I've waited too long for something worth it." The afternoon sunlight turned everything honey warm. A few of the ranch hands brought out guitars, and before long, someone coaxed Emma to sing. She hesitated, cheeks coloring. "I don't," she began, but Levi interrupted, voice low enough only she could hear. "You do. You always have." Her breath caught. Then with a small nod, she began to sing soft at first, uncertain, but growing steadier with each note. The melody carried through the fields, the same lullaby her mother once hummed to chase the darkness away. Levi listened, every line pulling something tight in his chest, until he couldn't help but join in, his rough voice blending with hers. When the song ended, the crowd clapped, but Emma only looked at Levi. "You sang," she whispered, smiling through tears. He reached up, brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "I didn't have much choice. You started it." The laughter that followed was easy, bright, and real. The ranch, once silent and heavy with memory, now hummed with life again. Emma leaned against him, watching the horizon where day met sky. "You know," she said quietly, "I came here to say goodbye." Levi turned, his voice a low murmur. "Then I'm glad you stayed at the door." She smiled, resting her head on his shoulder as the sun dipped low. This time, neither of them moved to leave.